Hi, welcome to this week's session of Terpene Therapy. If you're a new listener, thank you for taking a chance and making a choice to check us out this week. Really appreciate you being here, and you're helping to build one of the terpiest communities that the world has ever seen up to this point. And if you're a returning listener, it's like I say every single week, we couldn't do it without you, and we wouldn't want to anyways, because it wouldn't be a big old terp party without each and every one of y'all over here hanging out and enjoying some delicious terps over here with us. We're going to go in with a little bit of a smaller low temp dab today just to start the episode off. We've got some solventless soup kitchen over here. This is the pink berry lemonade. Cheers. This is definitely one that's a treat. And looks like the light just went off behind me. But I digress. Oh, we're having so much fun over here today. Yeah, this is a real treat. I love the branding on these solventless soup kitchen jars too. If you haven't gotten one yet, I highly recommend it. It's basically a fucking can of Campbell's soup reinvented into your favorite jar of hash. And so one thing I always like is the top half of the soup label is always kind of like a creative, strain-inspired image. And then the bottom half, you get that nice, consistent logo that really drives it home, makes you know that you're having a solventless soup kitchen jar in your hand. Just to give you all a little bit of a nose on this one, and fuck it, let's go ahead and do a little camera view for y'all. This is a little terp cam view. Let's see, we've got the trusty, we've got a new tool over here on Terpene Therapy. Got the headlamp going on. And this is so y'all can get a good idea of, let's turn the exposure down a little bit. There we go. This is so y'all can get a good idea of the hash that's being smoked over here on the table today. Yeah, like I was saying, this is the pink berry lemonade from Solventless Soup Kitchen. Definitely a producer that has become a mainstay in the terpene therapy terp stable, and one that I don't see going anywhere for quite some time. I agree with the ethics behind the growing. I agree with the different varieties of flavors that are available, and we've got pretty similar tastes as far as what we actually like to smoke on a personal level. So we're able to have those conversations about, you might like this from this batch, you might like that from that batch. You know what I mean? It's always good to have those relationships built up between, I guess, the consumer of the hash and the producer of the hash. And that's kind of what I try and do over here on Terpene Therapy, is bridge the gap between the consumer and the producer. It's two sides of the same coin. And, I just try and be on the outside of that coin. So let's go ahead and dive into today's topic. And that is going to be some METRC shopping experiences up in Washington State, specifically on the Olympic Peninsula. So for those of y'all that have been watching for a while, you know that typically we feature products from the traditional market over here on Terpene Therapy. In the very beginning, we've had actually some, I-502, which is the Washington State market. In the very beginning episodes, we had some flower from, I believe it was Fire Bros and K Savage. And those two, I do remember smoking pretty good. I think I'm a citrus person more than a Gary person. And so the Gary Payton cross that I had from Fire Bros, I maybe just didn't enjoy as much on the fact that it was a Gary Payton cross versus I'm trying to think back to like episode 1 and 2 of Terpene Therapy right now. I believe that jar was a K Savage Angela, if I'm correctly, or if I am thinking correctly. Am I correctly? Is that a thing a person can be? But if I'm thinking correctly, it was the Angela from them. And that has a very nice, I won't say candy orange flavor. It's more of like an orange peel, citrus rind. Like if you were to, use a cheese grater on the outside of an orange type of deal. Very pleasant flavor, not sickly. 'Cause there's some orange flavors out there that kind of almost taste like puke in a way. And not that that's a bad thing, but for me, I've experienced them now and I've come across them, and I know that there's certain orange terps that I love a whole lot, and there's certain that maybe just don't work well for my personal tastes. But regardless, I did decide to do a little adventure into the METRC market and figure out, what was good in the Washington area. And so I'm not exactly sure if any of these are good. I want to give a little bit of a disclaimer right here. I went with the bud tender's recommendations for all of these strains right here, and companies as well. I went in there and asked for good soil grown flower that was, I guess, grown in a sustainable method. And after, having a couple minutes of conversation with the bud tenders, I felt like, they were able to at least point me in what they believe to be the right direction. And that's why I always go with that too, because if I'm going to be shopping in a store, especially repeatedly, I'll be up in the Pacific Northwest for another couple of months. I think that it's important to develop that relationship with the person who is, I guess, able to have a better idea of the general landscape of the market. I'm not too familiar with the I-502 market. It's something that, being out based in Kentucky, we don't really have much access to. And I don't know too much about these. And also, I feel like more often than not, on a personal level, I've been burned by recreational purchases. So maybe I've got a bit of a bad taste in my mouth personally. And I'm always looking for that taste to be changed. I'm always looking for a good experience that people that don't have access to the traditional cannabis market can simply go, if they're 21 years or older, can go into a storefront and have access to these products. You know what I mean? So let's go ahead and dive into... See, I can't smoke these on here because the current satellite studio that I'm in doesn't like me to smoke joints inside, but the hash seems to be fine. But let's go ahead and dive into the bags. I'll give you all a little bit of an idea of what the nose is when you open the bag up, as well as what the general texture of the flower is, and a little bit of a visual as well. We'll get the terp cam back out. And man, one of my corgis today is just adventuring around. See, I didn't want to leave them in the room today because last time I did that, they wanted to bark a lot during the episode. And not that it's an impedance to the audio quality necessarily, but it definitely distracts me and keeps me from being able to keep it on track. But hey, look, I guess they're doing that today still anyways. But yeah, let's go ahead and dive into this one. So the place that I picked this up at was, oh my God. See, and there they go. And anybody out there that's thinking about owning a corgi, just know that they'll hear the slightest noise and continue to bark, even though you've told them that there's absolutely no reason for them to be barking. So, I digress. My first cannabis store experience. Man, I guess that solventless soup kitchen got the wires crossed up in the brain, or it being the first dab of the day. That one always, the first dab definitely hits the strongest. But yeah, my first METRC cannabis experience in Washington. I went to a Native American owned, I guess it's a cannabis dispensary, but it's like there is a certain business agreement between the tribes that live in this local area and I guess Washington State. And so this one was interesting because unlike most dispensaries, you could actually go in there and purchase seeds, which from my understanding in most I-502 dispensaries, you can't purchase seeds. But I would imagine that, due to there being different regulations in place for having a native-owned business versus a state-owned business, or not state-owned, but I guess registered with the state. There's a little, I want to make sure that that's clear. There's a little bit of a difference there. I think that there's just different rules. And so it's cool to be able to see seeds for sale as well, because I very much do believe in the teach a man to fish philosophy. And I think that you should grow your own cannabis and at the same time also support your local network of cannabis growers. You can't grow every single strain, and you might have a skill that is a strength for you that's a weakness for another person, and vice versa. You might be able to, by supporting your fellow community members, learn a thing or two as well. Who knows? But yeah, let's go ahead and crack into this one. I really want to give a quick shout out to the bud tender at Cedar Greens. They, most times that I go into a dispensary, I oftentimes feel like, and for good reason, I oftentimes feel like there's not much discussion to be had. It's just, what do you want? And here it is. And, this is how much it is. And, we'll pay for it and go back and forth. Very often, or not very often, do I have a discussion where we can really discuss local quality and, what changes they've seen in the market. I could go on forever about my experience in there with the bud tender, but, long story short, the guy actually had a fucking conversation with me. And I think that, not every time do I go in there needing that interaction, but every once in a while it is nice to talk to a person that you've never met before and have a more in-depth conversation without any preconceived biases of who you are or who that person is, or at the same time, what experiences that y'all have had together. When you have a conversation with a person you never met before, that's a whole different opportunity. So shout out to that dude working there. He did a really good job, and actually, I believe, pointed me in the direction of some fairly, I guess, ethically producing brands. So let's go ahead and crack this bag, or I guess not crack the bag open, but we'll tear the seal off the bag. It's good child-proof packaging right there. And so this is the strawberry banana. Not normally a flavor that I would go for right off the bat, but like I was saying, I was going based off the recommendations of the bud tender. And he pointed me in this direction. I was asking him, what is actually smoking well and what has a good flavor all the way down to the end of the joint. He recommended this one. And so this is by Falcanna. I say Falcon, and it's got a falcon on there, so I'm going to say Falcanna. And this is some clean green certified cannabis. Says it's a 50-50 hybrid. We're looking at, for whatever these numbers mean to you, we're looking at THCA at 26.1%, CBD at 0.1%, and the total cannabinoids at 28.8. And so, whatever that means to you, go ahead and think about it. And let's go ahead and see what the nose and texture of the flower is. I really wish I could roll this up and smoke this in here, but hey, this isn't my property, and I was always raised to be respectful and make sure that if you can't smoke in a place, then figure out another way to get high. But and that's with the combustion thing. So one thing with the packaging on these Falcanna bags is they come with a card, I suppose. It says limited edition. So I guess, it's a sticker actually. Yep, it's a sticker. So I got a limited edition Falcanna sticker. Really appreciate that, y'all. Let's go ahead and see what the nose is. Okay, so let's see. I'm getting a little bit of an earthiness and maybe a sweetness from it. That's normally why I don't go for banana terps personally. I really am more of like a gas funk or like a strong. I like those palate staining terps. Not necessarily, and I think that there's a place for all different flavors. And I think that it's beautiful that the cannabis plant can produce so many different wide varieties of flavors. And so, just because I don't particularly like a terpene profile or flavor profile, whatever, doesn't mean that it's bad cannabis. And so let's go ahead and get the fucking adventure lamp on and get to examining this flower. So I'm going to go ahead and set this down right there. Appreciate y'all hanging out over here today too. This is a solo episode, as you can see. So we're kind of in between doing conversations with people. That's always subject to change. We've got more episodes booked in February and March than we do in January. But if anybody out there listening has a business that they'd like to promote, or simply have a conversation that they want to capture on terpene therapy to help either preserve that knowledge in perpetuity or build a connection with their customer base, feel free to reach out. This is an open invitation. As long as you're an ethical and honest person, or even if you're not, hey man, come on here, share your perspective too. I believe that that gives people an opportunity to figure out if they want to support that or not. So let's go ahead and do the Terps eye view for the Falcanna strawberry banana. Oh, we're rhyming over here today. And let's go ahead and get gotta think of a creative name. I don't have a name for this headlamp yet. Because we got terpene therapy, we got the terp team, we got the terp cam over here, which, not to be confused with terp cam on Instagram. If you're looking for good, incredibly solid cannabis photography, particularly macro photography and event photography, I believe as well. I think I saw him walking around at the Smoking Jacket last year. Feel free to reach out to that dude on Instagram too. From my understanding and from what I can see of his work online, it seems to be pretty solid. But this is the terpene therapy terp cam over here. And let's go ahead and get a video of this flower. There we go. And see, it's got nice trichome coverage. And it's not overly dense, although I will say it does have some density to it. I'm not sure what the feeding regimen is for these flowers, nor do I know the growth practices 100%, but I do believe they're grown in soil and not another medium. So yeah, it looks like pretty good cannabis. Let's see if we can get a focus on the closer up. So leaving trichome heads on my fingers, but it's definitely a sandier flower as well. Yeah. Let's go ahead and examine this without the camera now. It's easier to focus on it now without doing the Terps eye view. But listen, I want to give you all that type of visual so you can see for yourself what's going on. Definitely a lot of trichome heads on here. I'm gonna go ahead and break the flower open and see if we get any. I don't see any mold or mildew fumes coming up. That's a good way to test for, if you're in an unregulated market. A good way to test on site, if you have the ability to, is take a bud out of the pack and kind of break it open. And if you see wispiness, like a cloud of spookiness coming out of the bud, that's not the pack you want to buy. And there's all different types of things that can cause that, but for the most part, it's mold and mildew that causes that wispiness, and that is not shit that you want to smoke. But there's none of that going on in this flower, so that is definitely something that is a good sign. And when you look at the inside of the bud, lots of good intact resin glands. I'll see a lot of sparkliness and not, there. Sometimes weed can look frosty, but then you get the light on it and you don't see a lot of sparkliness. And I think that to me just says that there's a lot of maybe stalks, but the actual trichome heads got fucked up somehow, maybe due to machine trimming or, all different types of ways that you can fuck up trichome heads. There's one way or another. But yeah, this is I'd have to smoke it to let you know, but as of right now on a terpene therapy scale, I give this a solid, where does it sit? I'd give it maybe like a 6.5, maybe even a 7, depending on how much weed I happen to have at the time. But maybe I would go, definitely I think that these people are putting out good work, but maybe I would go with a different flavor on a personal level. That being said, I'd really love to, have a conversation with the people and figure out what their story is, and maybe some experiences that they have operating on the I-502 market. We talked to a lot of traditional market processors on this podcast, and I think that it's important to capture conversations with, kind of both sides of the coin. But let's go ahead and go to the next bag that was suggested to me by the bud tender. And so keep in mind, these are the bud tender's recommendations. I just, I decided, fuck it, let the bud tender take the wheel on that one. So this is from Cannaorganix, which is actually a fairly local cannabis producer in sorry, they put little jokes on their barcodes on the tracking barcode on this one. That's fucking funny. It says, "Why did the golfer cry? He was going through a rough patch." Oh man, that's tragic. Oh yeah. So Cannaorganix. They're based out of Sequim, Washington, which I learned recently is pronounced Squim and not Sequim. And so it's fairly local to where I'm at right now, and it's cool to have local metric cannabis. In Kentucky there's plenty of local cannabis floating around, but you don't have any type of like metric market that exists for people to get their cannabis to more people who actually need and or would enjoy it. So let's go ahead and check out this black cherry gelato. Again, maybe another flavor that I wouldn't always go for, but I've never had black cherry gelato, and I never had the Cannaorganix batch of black cherry gelato from, let's see, it was processed on November 10th. So it's a fairly recent batch, pretty fresh. Let's go ahead and pop the bag open and see what's going on with it. Okay, a little bit louder of a nose out of the bag initially. Definitely more palate coating. And the buds in here are 2 different shades, which is cool. I would imagine maybe 2 different phenos of the same crop getting put together. I don't know. I'd have to have a conversation with the guys or women over there at Cannaorganix. But hey, listen, the door is always open over there on Terpene Therapy. So yeah, this is looking like fairly decent cannabis. I think that maybe I would go with this one over the last bag that I had on a personal level. So if your tastes align with mine, and if you've been watching for a while, you can kind of get an idea of what I tend to enjoy. I would maybe go with the black cherry gelato over this one, but we haven't got into the Gorilla Glue, which the Gorilla Glue is actually, I know it's kind of a played out strain, but it's one that I think is very tried and true. And if done well, if you have a good batch of Gorilla Glue, it's definitely gonna, make your eyes feel like they're fighting to stay open. Yeah, this is one that as more air gets into the bag, you get a little bit more release of those volatile compounds. And also smelling it with your mouth open versus smelling it with your mouth closed, you get some different notes as well. With the mouth open, you get definitely a little bit more of that gelato terp coming through. And that might just be coming through stronger now as well because the bag's been opened a little bit more. But yeah, it is. You get that cherry. It's like an earthy cherry gelato type of terp. Very nice. Can't wait to roll that one up later and smoke it. And, it's like I was saying, I got to be respectful of the environment that I'm in and make sure that I'm not, stepping on any toes when it comes to people extending their, graciousness and letting us use their property. So that being said, we're going to go ahead and move on to this next one. This is from Dungeness Dank, small batch craft cannabis. And let's see if we can see where they're based out of. So Prince Farms LLC. Does not say where they're based out of, but we are looking at, let's see, 1 gram, no pesticides used. If there's any certifications on this. So I don't see any of those like testing certifications, but that doesn't mean that it didn't undergo it. It just means that it's not on the packaging right here. So they do actually put the lineage of the Gorilla Glue 4 on here, which is Kim's Sister times Sour Dub times Chocolate Diesel. And, you can't go wrong with either of those strains. So when you throw them all together, it makes a pretty good gluey kind of feeling. So let's go ahead and crack this bag open. See if it's the Gorilla Glue that I remember from being in college. Because I'm young enough to where Gorilla Glue started coming around my freshman year. Oh, yeah. Yeah, and this actually has a little bit even heavier of a chem nose than some other Gorilla Glues I've had. It's pretty good. Okay, so the buds are mashed down a little bit, but here, let me get this on the terp side. Let me get this on the fucking terp cam. I was about to say terp side view. If you want access to the terp side views, go check out the Patreon, though. I really would suggest, if this podcast has provided any type of value to you over the years, or if you just generally enjoy what we got going on over here, the Patreon is an excellent way for you to directly contribute to the growth and longevity of the Terpene Therapy podcast and experience. So let me go ahead and get the light on this one. This is a fucking hilarious thing. So these buds did get smashed down in the bag, I will say that. And that tends to happen from time to time when you're shopping on any market. You know what I mean? Traditional, METRC, you name it. It can happen. But that being said, this is probably the one that I would go for over all the other ones. I really love the nose that it has, and the resin quality is incredible. Even though it got smashed down, you can still tell it's been extremely well taken care of. Let's see if I can get some of that like shine. Yeah, you can see like the resin that's been smashed on there is just kind of like reflecting light almost. It's like a mirror finish. There we go. That's a good one right there. Yeah, man, this is one that I think I will probably roll up first and smoke it first. I'm not gonna lie to you. Shout out Dungeness Dank. They did a good job. Let's go ahead and peel these buds apart and see what's going on the inside. And I'm liking the look of these two as well. It looks like, let's see, when was this processed? Well, it doesn't tell me when it was processed, but it smells and looks like it's right at like its peak of curing. We're getting a good, so what I look for in my flowers personally is when you look at the inside of the bud, you can really start to see the metabolism and breakdown of the chlorophyll starting from the stem, working its way outwards. And so the bud turns from a fresh green to sort of a pale, goldish, greenish type of color and look. You know, it's there's a certain look and texture to it as well. And let's see, I'm gonna do some simple trimming real quick just to see what it looks like on the bracts versus the leaf. Yeah, this is probably, and see, this has the lowest THC percentage of all the flowers, but it's got the best nose, and I bet that it smokes pretty damn good. But hey, there's no telling, you know what I mean? I'm looking for any types of contaminants or anything like that. I don't see anything in these. And I cannot wait to roll that one up and smoke it later. So I really appreciate the suggestions from the bud tender working over there at Cedar Greens. And if you're ever in the, I guess, Sequim or Port Angeles area, which I'd highly recommend coming to check out probably during the warmer months, maybe like, you know, July through September. If you really enjoy hiking, if you enjoy camping, if you enjoy mycology, there's many different experiences to be had out here. I think there's hundreds of miles of trails surrounding me right now in my backyard. You know what I mean? I could go walk 15 minutes up the road and get right on a hiking trail. But if you're in the area, you know, this is definitely an area where it might be harder to get in contact with people in the traditional market to support those farms. So you might as well figure out, okay, well, what's a good locally owned dispensary storefront that I can shop from, and where do I feel good about putting my money towards? And so for me, it'd probably be Cedar Greens if I had to make that choice. You know, like I was saying, it's a native owned dispensary. And just in general, I think that cannabis is a industry that's dominated by people who are not Native Americans, we'll say that. And I don't know if it's just my sense of ethics, or maybe I've just been trained to believe this is right. But I always think that, you know, if someone from a demographic that is oftentimes underrepresented is making an effort to provide an outlet not only for their own community, but make an impact on the world around them to change the not only stigma of what it is. You know, I feel like maybe there's still some type of stigma against native cultures in this country versus non-native cultures in this country. And maybe there's good reason for that, I would say. But if you have an opportunity, don't feel bad about that. You know, just take a little bit of your energy and go support those businesses if that's what you have to do. Now, if you've got a particular farm in the Pacific Northwest and in the Olympic Peninsula that you like to work with, I always recommend directly supporting the farmer. But if you don't have that opportunity, I would say the next best way is to support dispensaries that are at least locally owned and maybe I don't know. Maybe there's no problem with supporting MSO style or MSO operating dispensaries, but, or maybe, what did I just say? MSO operating? That doesn't even make sense. I'm over here high as fuck. MSO dispensaries. Maybe there's no issue in supporting that, but for me, I was always raised to support the farmer first, and that's why I make that recommendation. And so, that being said, I might scoop me up another little dab real quick. And I'd like to say that he pointed me in the right direction for some good CBD and CBC gummies. And we're not going to weed all over the place. So we'll get into talking about that here real quick. For those of y'all that are unfamiliar with CBC, it is another cannabinoid found within the total resin matrix that is in the cannabis plant. And it stands for cannabichromene. It is another metabolic pathway for cannabolic acid to take. And so instead of becoming THC, it can also become CBD, or it can become cannabichromene. It can become a lot of different things, but cannabichromene is one that's interesting because anecdotally, there are a lot of reports suggesting that it potentiates the effects of cannabinoids, particularly THC. So if you've got a high tolerance to THC, taking cannabichromene can maybe lower the tolerance of it, or make the effects strong. I use the word potentiate, but that means to make the effects of the dose stronger. So either way, however that works, I'm going to go ahead and eat one right now. So I was just talking about how you shouldn't support MSOs. Or if you have the same ethics as I do, you probably likely wouldn't support an MSO. But the wild CBD gummies are halfway decent, and very rarely do I see a product that has cannabichromene in it, especially on today's market. I bet that'll change over the next coming years, but as of right now, these are a pretty good option, at least for me. But if there are better options for cannabichromene, especially if someone out there knows of any cannabichromene dominant cultivars, and if those cultivars make hash where that is at, I would love some full spectrum cannabichromene dominant hash. I think that would be the best way, but until then, I'll take what I can get. And let's go ahead and clean the... We're working with the wave quartz over here today. Like I said, been saying, it's one of my favorite travel nails that I've used over the years. Definitely give him a reach on Instagram, and I think he's gonna figure out a website at some point, but you know how that goes. It's gotta make the money. Man, I tell you what, I'm excited to dig back into this. Or I've already dug back into it. It looks like I've already scooped up a dab. I've been having to take a little bit of like not a tolerance break necessarily, but ever since doing the 100 dab episode, your tolerance gets so high after doing something like that, you've almost just gotta like smoke less to let your body have a little bit of a break, to like reset your sensitivity to your exogenous cannabinoids. We're over here using the big words today. Let's go ahead and get this heating up. Yeah, I appreciate y'all hanging out. I hope y'all enjoyed last week's episode with Cannaorganix. That one, beyond just doing the episode and that being a good episode, at least in my eyes, I think that that whole experience for the weekend was something that maybe was needed on my part, and I realize that it's time to really lock in, dial in, and take this fucking terpene therapy experiment to whatever the quote-unquote next level is. You know what I mean? I think that this is something that it's not even that I think, and I hate using the word I think that I use that as like a speech filler in a sense. So if you ever hear me say that, just know that it's a speech filler. But from what I've been told, this podcast, community, Terp team, the many different names that it has, seems to provide value to at least one or two people out there. And I don't think that I can stop doing this anytime soon. So it's like, yeah, man, I'm really grateful for the experience that I had out there this past weekend. It's very rare that you find people that can understand what you've been through in your life outside of just doing what you do for work or outside of the weed world, you know what I mean? Because beyond just all of this, there's a whole living, breathing person behind that. And sometimes I even fail to forget that, and I get so caught up in making sure that this exists and continues to exist that sometimes you just, it's like you get so wrapped up in the creation of it that you almost become it. And I think that that's not how this whole thing started. And in order to really dial in, I've got to be able to have those interesting conversations beyond just about the cannabis thing with people who are in the cannabis space. Maybe that's what I relate to, because that's what I was, I guess, I don't know if raised around is the right word, but during some very formative years of my life, I spent growing cannabis with my parents. And, well, specifically my dad more so, because for a lot of it, my mom was sick and she couldn't physically do the stuff to be able to take care of the cannabis plants. But we did that because cannabis does improve the quality of life for people that are in those situations. Where am I going with this? I think that, the conversations that I had with Cannaorganix outside of what we captured for the podcast, I think those are going to be some ones that are heavily impactful for how I operate this year and going forward. And I'm planning on becoming more efficient, even terpier, and all around a more expansive and inclusive experience for those of y'all out there that are at home watching, dabbing, smoking along with us, And so I really appreciate the support. Let's go ahead and get the TSV loaded up. And I think that, it already is loaded up, and I think that I'm stoned. So let's get this going on. Set it to about, I want a quick heat up today, and so we'll go at about, 1100 degrees. And, let's see, are we there? And there we are. So, yeah, we've got some interesting episodes coming up. One that I know for sure that we have locked in is the Wojo Wax episode, and I think we're gonna tour the facility as well. Don't quote me on that, and don't necessarily get your hopes up, but there might be some interesting Patreon content coming from that experience as well. And we've got some other ones that are tentative. We're in the process of getting those booked right now. I can't wait to see what 2024 has in store. I just know that it's going to be a year of figuring out how to become even more efficient as a person. I think that's the goal for this year. How can I dial in my workflow? How can I expand the community? How can I provide even more value in a denser way. And I think that it's possible. And not only do I think it's possible, I think it's simply what I have to do and what I will do. And so, you know, you'll get to fucking hang out and hopefully stick around for the ride. And if you want, you know, you can always reach out to people as well. If you're out there listening, you can always reach out to people that you'd love to see on Terpene Therapy Podcast. You know, I like to think that as a terp team, you know, it's a team effort, and maybe just casually mention it. You know what I mean? I think that the more people think like, oh, maybe there's a demand for this. You know what I mean? I'm out here telling y'all, you know, y'all are gonna be my little minions. This is some Jedi mind tricks that we're using right now. Man, I am over here high off this. I really enjoyed the genetics for this pinkberry lemonade. It's got my brain in a creative place this morning. Definitely one that if you know where to grab it, you might as well. Man, I cannot get enough. See, this stuff is just, the solventless soup kitchen, definitely up there for what's going to be in the stable for 2024. I can tell you that. Let's go ahead and get the dab right on. And got a knock at the door. Let's see what's going on. Looks like a telemarketer of some type. So we're just going to ignore him. But hey, that's the beauty of recording in a not a studio environment. But hey, I'm sure that dude'll head out here soon. Looks like he's a door-to-door, hey, can I give you some satellite internet kind of guy. So yeah, we'll figure it out. And until then, let's go ahead and take this dab. And well, looks like let's see, Astrid, be quiet. Let me go ahead and get this real quick. And I appreciate y'all hanging out. We're gonna figure out what that is here in a second. But yeah, it's looking like it's gonna be an interesting year. Appreciate y'all sticking around and continuing to support Terpene Therapy. If you feel the need to be a Terpier team member, please go ahead and check out the Patreon. I really appreciate that. And I will see y'all for another session of Terpene Therapy next week. Man, that's a delicious one. Big shout out to Solventless Soup Kitchen. Oh, actually, fuck it. We're not done with the episode. I think that guy got me thrown off. Hey, this is a false ending to the episode. Y'all better be sticking around. Let me make sure that dude is out of here. Looks like he's just doing something weird. Like I was saying, that's the beauty of being in these things. And the reason we're not done with this episode is because I forgot the entire fucking second half. That dude really got me thrown off. So don't fucking you know, we're not done yet. But yeah, I want to go ahead and talk a little bit about my experience. So after going from, oh Jesus, that guy got me freaked out. Sometimes you get a knock on the door and it's not always a good memory. That being said, the experience though that I had at Cedar Greens and at the next store that we're about to discuss is probably some of the better experiences that I've had in a dispensary style environment. Definitely a little bit more, I don't want to use the word relaxed in that they weren't sticking to regulations, because they were following everything to the T as far as making sure that I had my ID, that I was of age to be in there, and that, you know, I was following all the rules and regulations that they have. But at the same time, it actually felt like less of a customer service experience and more of, I'd say, more of a educational experience. And I don't know if that's simply me being me and going in there and trying to, you know, say I'm in here for doing brand research for the local areas for terpene therapy. I don't know if they treated me different in that instance or not, but what I can say is that going into the next store, which is a locally owned Port Angeles dispensary called Spark It, going into them, they definitely took the time to make sure I was fully educated on the different types of testing regulations that are available here in Washington State, which turns out that there are multiple different regulations that you can, or that there are multiple different testing methods and regulations that you can test your product with. Some are mandatory, some are not mandatory, but I think that you have the option and ability as a cannabis brand in Washington to kind of go above and beyond what the traditional standards and methods of testing for contaminants in cannabis are. And so the flower that I picked up from Spark It, based on the bud tender's recommendation, which we got to talking, and of course he pointed me in the direction of the Amnesia Haze. And so this is grown by Blazin out of, I believe, Bellingham, Washington, if I am correct. Yep, made with love in Bellingham. So, you know, that's not too far to hop, skip, and jump across the water, you know what I mean? But this Amnesia, I really wanted to talk about on here because it is a... How do I put this in a concise and succinct way? It's a strain that takes me back to a different time in my life. I grew this strain personally from 2016 to 2018 with my parents, and then with my dad once my mom got too sick to help care for the plants as well. And let's go ahead and crack this open because I really, really do love this strain in particular. The nose on this one takes me back to my parents' basement, and so I will always love this strain, and it has a special place in my heart. But let's see if this is actually a good example. And off the bat, you get a really beautiful Amnesia Haze terp. It's a fucking excellent example of it. So with Amnesia Haze, you're going to see a lot of terpinolene and omacine. You're also going to get some caryophyllene as well, and it's going to give you that spicy note. For me, Amnesia Haze is kind of a rich, spicy, cedar-esque. You get hints of citrus rind, like lemon rind, like lemon zest almost. But really heavy on the spice and the fucking cedar-esque type of smell flavor. And let's go ahead and get the terp cam going for this one. This is one that I'm excited about. And let's see, let's get this going right here. And so these buds are a little bit. Oh, we're gonna have a corgi in the terp cam. So these buds are a little bit denser than the Amnesia that I am normally used to. Let's go ahead and turn the light on for them. There we go, adjusted it. So these are a little bit denser than what I'm used to, or at least what I grew. But that's the beauty of different recipes and different growing environments, is you get different results with the same genetic. And I think that, you know, cannabis is a beautiful thing because of that. Let's see if I can go ahead and get a better, there we go, there's the better focus. And so once again, this is the Amnesia Haze from Blazin out of Bellingham, Washington. Really, really enjoying the flavor on this one. And, or not the flavor, I suppose, but the nose, because once again, I'm not allowed to smoke flower inside. You know, the hash is good. If there's any Amnesia Haze hash rosin floating around that washes, I haven't seen it personally, but someone out there point me in the right direction. Until then, I'll stick with this flower. And I wish I knew the growth methods for this. It says sustainably grown on the bag, and I would imagine that they're using soil as well. They are hand trimming this too, which is good, so you get a little bit better preservation of the trichome heads in there. But, you know, let's go ahead and crack it open and see what's going on the inside. It's definitely a pretty decent example. And I mean that in the best way possible. Like, this is, in my eyes, a good example of some smalls from an Amnesia Haze plant, and I would really like to see an example of maybe, I don't know, I'm sure if I were to go grab an ounce of this, I could see some bigger buds of it. But even still, you can see the resin glands in there. It's definitely a beautiful thing. And cracking it open, it really reveals that haze terp. It's almost like a warmth. Man, I tell you what, it's really delicious. See, I don't know what to smoke first between the Gorilla Glue 4 from Dungeness Dank or the fucking Amnesia from Blazin. Maybe I will roll small little pinners of both and then make like a bigger joint of them blended together, because I don't think I've ever mixed together an Amnesia Haze and a Gorilla Glue 4, and it might be a good mixture. We'll have to see what's going on with that. So I really appreciate all the different education that I was given, because, you know, like I was saying earlier, there are a lot of different options for getting your cannabis tested on the regulated market in Washington. I believe the one that stuck out to me from what I remember being in this store, because I did admittedly take a big dab before going to the weed store. Silly me, who would have ever thought, and didn't remember all the details from the conversations that I had. But if I'm remembering correctly, the tested with confidence kind of goes above and beyond your standard pesticide testing, and it's actually a lab that has been around before cannabis was legal in Washington state and was testing organic vegetables for, I guess, being safe to consume on the food market. They transitioned into testing cannabis material, flower material as well. And so they're considered to be one of the more reputable testing facilities in the state. I really needed to do more research and look into the different testing options, and if there's been any issues. You know, there's certain testing labs in other markets that have had issues with sort of, pay-to-play testing, where you can, I don't know, let's say something doesn't pass, well, it might pass, you know what I mean? And I think you can figure out how that happens. But, you know, that's neither here nor there. I would just like to know what's going on out here in Washington specifically, because it seems like, from my understanding, they're trying their best to do a good job out here on the regulated market. That's not always the case in some markets. Some markets are owned by a small, I guess, almost an oligopoly of companies that, you know, when they're the only option, is there an incentive to grow the best? I don't know. So that's something for y'all to think about out there. And like I was saying earlier, I really appreciate the continued support. I think the guy that is the door-to-door salesman is finally gone. So I'm going to go check on that and make sure. And then I'm going to go smoke this doink that I rolled up yesterday. And I always like to roll up my little hash holes and then let them sit vertically overnight I think that it helps with how they smoke for me personally, with how I smoke, with my personal smoking ethics. And it might work good for you too. It's a technique you could always try out. Like roll your joint that you want to smoke the next day. It requires a little bit of discipline and dedication, but roll that joint and let it sit out overnight. And then that next morning, you'll have a joint that is almost like it's been perfected by the Earth's forces. It's been perfected by gravity and rotation, and it's ready to smoke at this point, as far as I'm concerned. But like I said, I really appreciate the continued support. If you enjoyed what you've seen today, I really appreciate it. If you go check out the Patreon, it is what helps this whole thing continue to keep going. Your continued support, without it, terpene therapy doesn't continue to exist. So I really appreciate it. And if you can't afford, if it's not in your budget to go onto the Patreon and become a Terpene team member, then continuing to watch these episodes, leaving comments on the Instagram posts, just generally being a positive community Terp team member, being a positive person, that's good enough for me. You know what I mean? And so I appreciate any type of support that someone has for this podcast. And without it, it doesn't, it's like, it's a community. And I think without the community continuing to come together over and over, the community no longer exists. So if there's been any value provided to you by this podcast, I really appreciate the continued support. You know what I mean? And I will see y'all next week for another session of terpene therapy. And I'm real bad at the self-promotion shit, in case you can't tell.